1.
You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. You will hear a conversation between two friends called George and Nina about a summer music festival. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 and 2. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 and 2.
Hi, George. Glad you're back. Loads of people have phoned you.
Really?
I felt just like your secretary.
Sorry. I went into the library this afternoon to have a look at a newspaper and I came across something really interesting.
What? A book?
No, a brochure from a summer festival, mainly Spanish music. Look, I've got it here.
Spanish music? I really love the guitar. Let's have a look. So what's this group, Guittarini?
They're really good. They had a video with all the highlights of the festival at a stand in the lobby to the library, so I heard them. They play fantastic instruments, drums and flutes and old kinds of guitars. I've never heard anything like it before.
Sounds great.
Okay, shall we go then? Spoil ourselves?
Yes, let's.
The only problem is there aren't any cheap seats. It's all one price.
Well, in that case, we could sit right at the front. We'd have a really good view.
Yeah, though I think that if you sit at the back, you can actually hear the whole thing better.
Yes. Anyway, we can decide when we get there.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 3 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 3 to 10.
So will you fill in the form, or shall I?
I'll do it. Name, George O'Neill. Address, 48 North Avenue, Westsea. Do you remember our new postcode? Still can't remember it.
Just a minute. I've got it written down here. WS6 2YH. Do you need the phone too?
Please. I'm really bad at numbers.
01674 553 242. So let's book 2 tickets for Guittarini.
Okay. If you're sure $7.50 each is all right. How do you feel about the singer?
I haven't quite decided. But I've noticed something on the booking form that might just persuade me.
What's that then?
Free refreshments.
Really?
Yes, look here. Sunday, 17th of June. Singer. Ticket, £6, includes drinks in the garden.
Sounds like a bargain to me.
Yes. Let's book 2 tickets for that. So, what else? I'm feeling quite keen now. How about the pianist on the 22nd of June?
Anna Ventura? I've just remembered that's my evening class night.
That's okay. I'll just have to go on my own. But we can go to the Spanish dance and guitar concert together, can't we?
Yes, I'm sure Tom and Kieran would enjoy that too. Good heavens, £10.50 a ticket. I can see we're going to have to go without food for the rest of the week. We'll need to book 4.
Wish we were students. Look, children, students, and senior citizens get a 50% discount on everything.
If only.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
You will hear the education officer
turn
of a
to part
dinosaur
2.
museum giving information to some teachers who are planning a school visit. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Hello, and thank you for asking me to your teachers' meeting to talk about the Dinosaur Museum and to tell you a bit about what you can do with your students there. Well, let me give you some of the basic information first. In regard to opening hours, we're open every day of the week from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. except on Mondays, when we close at 1:30 p.m. And in fact, the only day in the year when we're closed is on the 25th of December. You can book a guided tour for your school group any time that we're open. If you bring a school group to the museum, when you arrive, we ask you to remain with your group in the car park. One or more of the tour guides will welcome you there and brief you about what the tour will be about. We do this there because our entrance is quite small and we really haven't got much room for briefing groups in the exhibition area. As far as the amount of time you'll need goes, if you bring a school group, you should plan on allowing a minimum of 90 minutes for the visit. This allows 15 minutes to get on and off the coach, 45 minutes for the guided tour, and 30 minutes for after-tour activities. If you're going to have lunch at the museum, you will of course have to allow more time. There are 2 cafes in the museum with seating for 80 people. If you want to eat there, you'll need to reserve some seating, as they can get quite crowded at lunchtime. Then, outside the museum at the back, there are tables, and students can bring their own lunch and eat it there in the open air.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
When the students come into the museum foyer, we ask them to check in their backpacks with their books, lunchboxes, etc. at the cloakroom before they enter the museum proper. I'm afraid in the past we have had a few things gone missing after school visits, so this is a strict rule. Also, some of the exhibits are fragile, and we don't want them to be accidentally knocked. But we do provide school students with handouts with questions and quizzes on them. There's so much that students can learn in the museum, and it's fun for them to have something to do. Of course, they'll need to bring something to write with for these. We do allow students to take photographs. For students who are doing projects, it's useful to make some kind of visual record of what they see that they can add to their reports. And finally, they should not bring anything to eat into the museum or drinks of any kind. There are also a few things that students can do after the tour. In the theaterette on the ground floor, there are continuous screenings of short documentaries about dinosaurs which they can see at any time. We used to have an activity room with more interactive things like making models of dinosaurs and drawing and painting pictures, even hunting for dinosaur eggs. But unfortunately, the room was damaged in a bad storm recently when water came in the roof, so that's closed at the moment. But we do have an IT centre where students have access to CD-ROMs with a range of dinosaur games. These games are a lot of fun, but they also teach the students about the lives of dinosaurs, how they found food, protected their habitat, survived threats, that kind of thing. And I think that's all I have to tell you. Please feel free to ask any questions if you would like to know anything else about.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3. Part 3.
You will hear a conversation between a science tutor and two first-year students who are being given some practical tips for conducting experiments. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Now, Vincent and Tessa, I've asked the two of you to come and see me because I'm a bit concerned after that incident in the science lab last week. I realise that neither of you have had much experience in a laboratory before.
Well, we mostly just studied theory at high school.
And we rarely got the opportunity to carry out any experiments.
Fair enough, but we must all abide by certain safety procedures. The last thing we want is for one of our students to get hurt.
We understand that.
Our priority is to make sure that the chemistry laboratory is a safe place, and actually, accidents can easily be prevented if you just think about what you're doing at all times.
It sounds simple enough.
It is if you always use good judgment, observe safety rules, and follow directions.
We've read the rules on the poster inside the lab.
And yet last week you were seen working in the lab without eye protection.
What do you mean? I was wearing my glasses.
Prescription glasses are not safety glasses. You must always wear the goggles provided. You'll find they fit quite comfortably over your ordinary glasses.
Oh, I see.
Just make a habit of putting them on before you start, and keep them on until you are finished. And another thing, never eat or drink while in the laboratory.
What? Not even water?
Not even water. At least not until after clean-up. Then be sure to wash your hands thoroughly with soap and hot water, and dry them on a clean towel first. And Tessa, your hair should be tied back when you're in the lab.
It's not that long.
Still, it poses a hazard when you're working with chemicals or a naked flame. If you can't tie it back or pin it up, see if you can tuck it into a cap or something.
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you. Now, Vincent, last week you wore a t-shirt and trainers in the lab. The rules clearly state that long-sleeved shirts and leather shoes must be worn.
Oh, yes, I remember. I was late getting back from sports practice and I didn't have time to change.
Well, it mustn't happen again.
Okay, I'll see that it doesn't.
Good. As for the rest of the safety precautions, refer to the safety poster inside the lab and you shouldn't have any problems.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
Now, before you go, a word about record keeping.
Oh, good. I was going to ask you about that.
What's the best way to keep track of what we're doing in the lab?
Well, obviously all your observations should be written down. I know you think you won't forget stuff and you'll be able to recall it later, but generally this turns out not to be the case. Written data, however, are a permanent record, and you must be thorough. Organise and record everything in a bound notebook.
I use a spiral notebook.
And I use a large notepad.
That won't do. A book with binding ensures the pages are not easily removed or lost. Oh, and be sure to write your entries in complete sentences.
Isn't that a waste of time?
Surely notes are good enough.
You might think so, but brief notes can be hard to decipher at a later date, whereas with full sentences you are less likely to misinterpret data.
I make sketches, you know, simple drawings.
That's a good idea, Vincent, but be sure to date them.
You want us to write the date next to each drawing?
Yes. Every sketch and every entry must be dated.
What about headings?
Use the title of the experiment as your first entry. When you have completed your observation entries, answer any questions that have been posed, and then, finally, write your conclusion.
How do we write a conclusion? Do we need to repeat things like the questions and our findings, or the time it all took?
Just write your own ideas or feelings about the experiment as the conclusion. Oh, and remember to sign it. Well, that's all I have time for today. If you have any questions, ask the lab assistant or come back to me.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4. You'll hear a student union representative presenting the views of college students about the design of a new building. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
We're very grateful that the committee has agreed that a representative for the Students' Union can present student suggestions about the design for the proposed new union building. We appreciate that some of our ideas may not be feasible in the circumstances, but we do feel that it is important that the ultimate beneficiaries of the facilities should have some say in its design. If I could start by briefly explaining what steps were taken to find out student opinion and how we have arrived at conclusions. Firstly, a meeting was held in the current union for our SU committee to explain the options. Then we invited all students to submit written suggestions for the design, placing cards in a suggestion box. These suggestions then provided the basis for the design of a questionnaire which was completed by approximately 2,000 of the college students over a period of 3 weeks. Finally, the SU committee collated the results and drew up a report. If I can just hand around a copy of that report. This presentation is essentially a summary and discussion of the key points of this report. So, in broad terms, the consensus was as follows. Firstly, regarding the crucial matter of the site, we presented the 3 options that you have proposed. 1, in the city center near the Faculty of Education, 2, on the outskirts of the city near the park, and 3, out of town near the halls of residence. We asked students to cite reasons for and against these sites, and there was remarkable agreement on all 3. Site 1 was unpopular because of traffic and parking problems. Site 2 had a number of supporters, mainly because it was close to most lecture rooms, and Site 3, out of town near the halls of residence, was clearly the most popular because of access from living quarters. It was clear that the union was mainly to be used after lectures. It was also felt that the larger site would allow more room for a choice of facilities.
You have some time to look at questions.
Our second area of interest was obviously the facilities. There was minimal interest in having a library on the premises, but one option seemed to be a reading room instead, more useful. We would like the current table games room to be replaced with a small gym, and if possible, a small swimming pool. Not, of course, Olympic-sized. There was a large number of respondents in favor of a travel agents and insurance center. We also request that there be the offices of the Student Counseling Center, moving this from the refectory. There was, however, much disagreement about whether to build a drama theater. Just over 40% of the respondents were in favor, but a largish minority were strongly against it, claiming that it is elitist and a waste of funds. Essentially, the jury is out on that. Finally, given the number of unfortunate incidents in the current union over the past few months, a strong point was repeatedly made about security. The recommendations would be at least video surveillance and security personnel who would check student union cards on request. We doubt if it would be feasible to have a check at reception of all people coming in. Well, this is the summary of the views of the student population. As I say, fuller details are given in our report, but I'm happy to take any questions if you have them.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
I can hear the demons call when they do what they do. And now I feel like taking off, find a place with a view. The pain is never